winning budgets, victory budgets, it's safe to say that's what he intends to see. You were saying it's a budget that's going to leave us worse off as citizens. Explain in detail, please.
Say that bit again. The last bit.
Your side insists that this is a budget which is a bye-bye budget, which is going to leave us poorer, and I'm asking you to explain.
Yeah. Well, good evening to your viewers and those who are listening to us. It is obviously a bye-bye budget. First and foremost, this is actually the last full budget of the government before the general election. The next budget will be a mid-year review, which will be in the middle of next year. And then we will, just before election, have the usual 3 months budget that we do in election time, which should expire by end of March for the new government budget. So it is definitely the last budget of the government, and we don't believe that this government will be retained, or the NPP party will be retained. So it is a bye-bye budget for them in terms of a full budget. But as I said, there are a couple of, mini budgets in between, mid-year and all that. And in terms of the content of the budget, I mean, I don't think there's anything really to write home about. I don't know anything that you picked in the budget that got you excited. There is nothing exciting in the budget. It is business as usual, rhetorics, talking, things they will do. But if they haven't been able to do the things they want to do in the last 7 years, I'm not sure how they will be able to do it in 1 year, especially when things are much harder now than they were in the last 7 years. Basically, the hardship was building up from year one, and I mean 2017 when they came in, and every year things were getting harder. Now it has snowballed for 7 years, and things are much, much harder now with the situation that we're in, where we have actually ended up on an IMF program. This budget is supposed to be more or less an IMF shepherded budget, or a budget presided over by the IMF. But we are here to actually check the numbers to make sure that I pick certain numbers that did not look right to me. So, sorry, I've indicated to my leadership on my side that we need to re-examine those numbers, and because it doesn't even follow the trend, to see whether I can share, some of those numbers with you. When you look on the growth, chart that they have projected, you realize that, and they were talking about growth, and you realize that the contribution of, I'm talking about sector growth to GDP. You're looking at agriculture, you're looking at industry, and you're looking at service. There are some numbers in the industry that did not look right because it's been declining since they took over. And the 1D1F hasn't actually helped industry in terms of sector growth. The same with agriculture. It's also been declining since the beginning of the planting for food and jobs. The contribution of GDP coming from agriculture has actually been declining. So I'm not quite sure what they've been planning that they call planting for food and jobs. And we don't know which industry they are opening. They will always refer to a conflict that they are opening that is not contributing to industry, to basically the industrial sector of the GDP. So we are here to look at the budget in details. We're just looking at what we have received, that we are going through. But I think we will see more things in the budget. We also know that there's 11 billion of taxes, but it's been hidden. But we will unwrap it, and then in the next couple of days come up with where all the taxes are hidden and how they amount to the 11 billion that we are talking about. One thing I also want to mention is that it did say that they took an economy from about 215 or something billion, and basically they've grown the economy to a trillion. What he didn't tell us is that we have done rebasing of the economy. When you do rebasing, you add to growth where you have not actually physically earned it, if it makes sense that way. Because when you rebase, you change your base year. In 2018, there was a rebasing done where the base year was changed from 2006 to 2010, I believe. So that obviously brings in some nominal GDP that otherwise had not been accounted for in previous years. So these are some of the things that we will basically unwind, if you like, or we will bring to bear when we had opportunity to.
Are you not simply trying to create trouble where there's none? You, before the presentation of the budget, your side had said Ghanaians should brace themselves for more taxes. You even gave a figure of how much taxes the government was going to raise and asked us to prepare and tighten our belts. The minister did not mention specifically any tax. No, you were saying that the taxes are hidden and you would have to go behind the scenes and discover them. I'm a bit concerned about this position.
If they are hidden, don't be concerned. It is our responsibility and our job to make sure that we hold the government accountable. Therefore, if we have seen this, we will have to open it up to Ghanaians to see exactly where these taxes are, because they've been disguised. And that was the whole idea, for Ghanaians not to think that they have imposed more taxes on them. So we have to actually open it up, so you see where these taxes are. And as I've told you, it's about 11 billion. Okay. And we will come and give you the breakdown of that.
If you could,
wrote the budget, not us.
If
so whenever we are able to come out of the budget, whatever we're able to extract out of the budget, will not be we finding trouble where there's none. There's trouble, that's why we are finding it.
Okay. If you could indulge me, I would be grateful if you can just stay on the line, because I want to speak to your colleague who is in government, Deputy Trade Minister, Dr. Stephen Amoah, known as Stika, MP for Inshai. So he's joining us on the other line. Doc, you're welcome to Eyewitness News.
Hello?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Great. The minister presented the budget statement. We've heard what happened. The minority side believes you have concealed taxes therein. It will take them days to unearth these taxes and announce them to Ghanaians, but they are very sure, cocksure, that there are taxes buried in there that they are going to reveal to us to show how we are going to really suffer. Can you just spare us all the struggle of going through that behind-the-door investigation and tell us what you are taxing?
Thank you very much. My regards to our listeners this evening. Thank you for having me on your prestigious platform. Actually, I find it very difficult to understand the angle from which my honorable member, in fact, senior, is coming from. Let me be honest and frank with you. We all got a budget statement today. I mean, after he had read it. And honestly, going through, I've gotten to where we have a tax relief. And I was thinking even there were too many. Because tax policy management is created in data. And for that matter, you don't wake up and say, I'm increasing taxes or I'm actually reducing taxes. It has to be done depending on the situation of your fiscal policy, whether it is so much disturbed that you have to consolidate it. And that is the situation which we find ourselves in today. But before the budget, our brothers, in collaboration with other relevant stakeholders, were putting out outcry. I mean, compelling the government and threatening the government not to increase taxes and that there's cash. Honestly speaking, it is even a strategic drift not to even increase taxes at this time. But of course, for humanitarian reasons or human faces, the finance minister and the government tried hard to listen to Ghanaians, not to burden them with any additional taxes, which rather should have been the right decision for now, for us to actually work on our fiscal space and put this country's economy on a very sound footing and move it forward and continue the restoration processes and the consolidation so that we can really get back on track properly and move on. But I think Ghanaians are not expecting that. I'm yet to find the taxes he's talking about because I haven't finished reading the document. In a way, of course, I mean, definitely every year's budget, you wouldn't have a budget that you say that nothing will be talked about concerning our internally generated fund, because the most important option to use now in dealing with our economic situation now is to generate revenue internally and use that for our financing and avoid as much as possible debt financing, which will lead to contracting loans to continue jeopardize our economic stability situation or growth. So I don't know what he wants to really talk about. Rather, I think he was going to allow the government for extending zero rate of VAT on locally manufactured African prints for 2 more years, waive import duties on import of electric vehicles for public transportation for a period of 8 years, waive import duties on semi-knocked down and completely knocked down electric vehicles imported by registered EV assembly companies in Ghana for a period of 8 years, extend zero rate of VAT on locally assembled vehicles for 2 more years, zero rate VAT on locally produced sanitary pads, grant import duty waivers for raw materials for the local manufacturer of sanitary pad, and grant exemptions on importation of agricultural machinery, equipment, and inputs and medical consumables, raw materials for the pharmaceutical industry. All these were decisions or steps taken by the government to alleviate the hardship confronting Ghanaians and also listening to Ghanaians as a listening government. So I think this is where our emphasis and our concentration should be, rather than trying to look for areas that you can only just criticize destructively. I think it doesn't augur well for us as a country.
Okay, thank you so much, Doc. So, but the critical thing is, you have said that you are not reducing, but slashing taxes completely on issues having to do with the locally produced sanitary pads. But the question, and you are Deputy Minister for Trade, is the capacity, is the industry ready for that? So that the question would be, if 90% of the sanitary pads are imported, you slashing down taxes on the locally produced ones will mean nothing, because people will still have to resort to importing because the local product is simply not there. How do you maneuver your way through that?
Let me get this clear to Ghanaians. When it comes to production, there are 3 main important relevant stakeholder groups or bodies. One, of course, government has to make sure it provides or offer a very conducive environment for industries to thrive and grow and kind of solve our problems and make sure that we can create the needed balance between aggregate demand and aggregate supply. That is there. But majorly, it is on the private producers themselves. If you go to the developed economy, it is not the government that actually produces all these things. It is rather the private sector or the entrepreneurs or the manufacturers. The other factor is the banking industry. As much as possible, they have to also do their best to support the private sector. So I understand your concern very well. However, we as a government are taking steps to encourage local production of sanitary pads so that incrementally we can probably get to the point that probably one day we'll say that we're not even going to import. It is one thing. But the other thing that the government has to look at critically, especially those who have direct role in managing our taxes, is leakages. Because there are goods in Ghana here being produced. However, those that we import, even retail prices are higher than the direct production cost or prices of the manufacturers. Not solely because of other production items, but because of tax evasion. So as much as we are even trying to provide conducive environment, enabling environment for them to produce a lot of sanitary pads and other things that will meet the utility expectations of the people. We should also look at other areas that will not give the importers even an advantage over them in terms of cost of production. Because most of them, in my opinion, also evade taxes. Go and find out why those who are producing electrical cables, such as Nexus, tropical cables or whatever, and the other part, the three major ones, one of them has collapsed entirely. The others are actually functioning at half capacity because of some of these things. Their counterparts that are importing are basically evading taxes, making their profit margin so high that they sell the things very cheap. So we cannot meet demand today as you were raising, correctly. However, we are helping and encouraging them to upscale their production of performances and go at a speed that at a point in time, we may not have to even import at all. And that is the decision of the government today. I really find the budget too good when it comes to tax policies, because in my opinion, honestly speaking, we should have rather introduced a lot of new taxes for us to deal with the step fiscal space, which of course we all know our debt to GDP is high as a result of impaired productivity that has been going on for about 2-3 years because of post-COVID issues. The government had revenue shortfalls of about 12 billion, and that we resort to the use of debt financing while GDP was not really growing remarkably, and because of our high debt to GDP, that led to most of our problems today. For us to restore that, we need to reduce the rate of borrowing and increase revenue generation. And the major way we can do is tax collection. Of course, they talk about broadening the base, and of course, people talk about expenditure cut, which I also agree. But how much can we cut? And how much are we going to save from that control to meet the high consolidated demand or the aggregate demand in terms of government obligation in performing its expenditures or outlay activities? We need to do all this analysis in a very financial, economic manner, not just qualitative statement and arguing and making. Because we have three key areas: our goods and services, and then our social contract with the people. We need to meet these, perform these obligations. The only way we can is to finance them mostly from our internally generated fund. If we don't, we are going to escalate our problems, because now it's like a bitter pill. If we avoid the bitter pill that will save the child tomorrow, then don't let us be happy and smiling. We may lose the child.
Okay.
And that is what we find ourselves in because of pressure from opposition. And I want to also end with this. I beg NDC and NPP. Anytime that NDC, they are in government, and they are coming out with policies that might help the people in the long term, we, the NPP guys, will go out there, incite Ghanaians against it, and they may not be successful. And when NPP today are in government, the same thing NDC guys will do. So are we going to recycle these antisocial behaviors and destroy Ghana, or at a point in time, we'll pull brakes and say, no, enough is enough. As the Latin will say, status es status. We need to come together, place premium on the importance of building Ghana, not for our group and individual interest. But if we keep on doing these things, my brother, Ghanaians will not really get any satisfaction from the two parties or the government, and will continue to suffer the way we are suffering, especially when we are import-driven economy. Okay. I think it is time that we put an end to some of these things.
Thank you so much. That's Honorable
it's a pleasure.
Deputy Minister for Trade and MP for Nshaizu, Dr. Stephen Amoah, also known as Stika. Let me conclude with Kwekuri Kitsegan, who's been on the other line listening into the conversation. Honorable, let me just take off from where he ended. Do you not think it is about time you, as an opposition party, praise a government that they simply did not present taxes, rather than going through the route you're going, where you say that you're going to unearth these taxes later in the voluminous document that was presented? That's what Sika seems to be suggesting.
Well, I admire my honorable brother's, patriotism. But with all due respect, we are all patriots. We all want the best for Ghana. Whatever is happening in the country, if it's good, we will all be enjoying it. If it's bad as it is now, we will all be suffering it. But with all due respect, let's talk about the failings of his government. not the patriotism of NDC, this, the NPP, this, that, and that. The government, the current government, the NPP government, under His Excellency President Nana Akufo-Addo and Dr. Baobia, that government has failed this country. The budget that was presented is not going to do anything to uplift anyone. And let me just go to this point. He was talking about internally generated. I don't know what he means by the internal generated. If government is generating any funds internally, it's either going to come from taxes or from domestic borrowing, apart from, royalties and other things that we get. So if you want to generate the fund internally and not get it from anywhere, it is either going to come through taxation or it's coming from borrowing from your own people, which is the domestic. We have borrowed to the hilt. As it stands at the moment, we owe our external creditors almost a $30 billion US. That's about 375 billion. And we don't have any concrete plan in place as to how we are going to be paying the money. And let me tell you something. What we see, whatever fiscal space that you see in the budget is artificial. Whatever deficit that they are talking about is also artificial. Because these numbers, if you want to look at your deficit, you are looking at your revenue against your expenditure. When you are not paying your debt, when you are not servicing your debt, you are not basically applying or you are not basically fully honoring your expenditure. So how can your deficit be the right amount of deficit? You have parked your paying your external debt, and you are claiming that you have this space, or you are claiming that you have this amount of deficit. Isn't that artificial? And if that is not addressed, whoever comes in, which obviously is going to be NDC in the next government, this will become a problem for us to solve. Because all of a sudden, our deficit, the picture of our deficit will change. Because when we come, we will have to address this external debt issue. And it will then feed into an expenditure and give us a much bigger deficit than is being presented to us at the moment. The same with the fiscal space.
Very well. Let's leave it here.
Presented with no fiscal space. Therefore, very little can be done. So we are not getting the true picture until we tackle the issue of the external debt.
Thank you so much for speaking to us. That's Honorable Kweku Ricketts Hagan. He was a Deputy Minister of Finance.